Why did Jesus die on the cross? So in this short video, I want to give you a very, very fast overview of some of the different understandings, in fact 8 different ways in which the death of Jesus has been explained. So we're going to start right at the start of the church. In the early church, there were kind of 4 ideas. And the first one, the one that I think is the clearest in the scripture, the one which stuck for a good 1,000 years without much challenge, was the idea that on the cross, Jesus defeated the evil one. Jesus defeated Satan. An early church leader who put this into words, Athanasius, said that even the very creation broke silence at his behest. The cross was a monument of victory, he said. So this was a cosmic event. By Jesus dying and being raised from the dead, it broke the power of death in the world, and all of creation was changed fundamentally forever. The idea of victory was achieved in the cross and the resurrection, and therefore it's not so much about you and I. We just get swept up in this whole cosmic thing. So the victory is number 1. Number 2, kind of closely tied to that, is the idea of ransom, which we find the word a couple of times in the Bible. And Origen really was fascinated with this idea of God having to pay a ransom. Now, a ransom is something you pay to someone who has got, typically someone or something that you value, held captive. You pay a ransom, they give you the thing back, or the person back. And Origen thought that who was this ransom paid to? If Jesus was the ransom, who was the hostage taker? And he said it can't be God. That wouldn't make sense. So it must be the devil. So somehow Jesus' death was paying a ransom to the devil so that the people would be freed. So it's kind of closely linked, this idea of the victory. A slight kind of tweak of that is Gregory of Nyssa had the idea that it was a bit like fishing, where you drop a hook into the water with a bit of bait on. So in a way, Jesus was like the bait. Satan took the bait, and then the fish was pulled out of the water. So it was almost like a trick. Satan was tricked by taking this ransom. Okay, that's the second one. Third one is that the cross demonstrates the love of God, and therefore inspires us to love in a similar way. And Augustine put that into words, said the incarnation and the cross show God's love for us and evoke our love for him. So it's about love, an example, setting an example of how we should behave selflessly towards other people, because God has shown that love to us. Fourthly, the idea of sacrifice. In the Old Testament, there was the idea based on the kind of Exodus story, the first Passover, where the people were told to kill a lamb and to put the blood of the lamb on their doorposts, and then when the angel of death passed over, they would be spared. And this idea, which had developed in the Jewish religion in the Old Testament into the temple system of sacrifice, quite a lot of the New Testament explanations kind of play around with this, particularly in the book of Hebrews, which makes the point that Jesus was the last one of these sacrifices. Augustine, him again, said that Jesus is both the priest, the one who offers this animal to be sacrificed, and also the oblation, the animal being offered. And the idea of Jesus being the lamb that was slain kind of is all part of this tradition. The fact that Easter happens over the Easter story happens at the Passover is significant with this. So there's this idea that somehow Jesus' death was a sacrifice, which meant that we could be cleansed of our sins. Now, as time moves on, getting into the sort of Middle Ages, a whole new slant on this started to evolve, and we're going to go to Anselm now, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury, I think, back in the sort of Middle Ages. And in these times, it was a feudal system. So the king held absolute power, and everyone else was a kind of servant, had to do whatever the king said. And in this context, Anselm had the idea that it was a bit like God the Father was like a king who had been offended by us, his servants, his vassals, his people. It's like we've committed treason against him. And the only way this violent, bloodthirsty king would be happy is if heads rolled. But Anselm said that therefore Jesus was the one who was killed so that the king could be satisfied. This is called the satisfaction theory. A few hundred years later, Calvin sort of took this idea and kind of brought it up to date. Now, we're now in the kind of 16th, 17th century, this sort of time. Calvin was a lawyer. So he thought it's more, rather than being a tyrannical king, he thought of it more like a law court. So he said that we've offended against God because of our original sin. So we're guilty, we were born guilty, and the things that we do don't really matter because we were born guilty anyway. And God hates us because of our sin. Because we were born sinful, God hates us. And the only way that we can get out of that, it basically someone has to pay the price. Someone has to be punished so that we can be made free. And Jesus kind of takes our place in the courtroom. So Jesus is punished rather than us, and this is called a substitution. Recently, people have started to pick at this a little bit and try and say that this doesn't quite make sense. It's not really forgiving. God isn't really forgiving in this because still someone has to be punished. God isn't merciful because someone has paid the price, whether that's Jesus or us. God is merciful to start with, and that's what triggered the whole event of the crucifixion. In more recent years, Steve Chalke famously called this cosmic child abuse, because God was made to feel better because his son was killed in the most brutal way, which is kind of abusive. So one of the more recent ways of thinking about this is that the realization that Jesus was challenging the authorities. Jesus is therefore the archetype of poor people standing up for justice. And like many of the people in liberation movements around the world, it doesn't end well for the people. Death is often the result of this challenging of the powers, but nevertheless, because Jesus did it and rose again, nevertheless, people should always push for what's right for the poor people. Jesus was showing solidarity with the poor and the oppressed. Another different way of thinking of it, which is almost like the victory model brought slightly up to date. Jürgen Moltmann was a German young man during the Second World War. He was conscripted to the German army, and he immediately surrendered to the British. He didn't want anything to do with the Nazi army. So he spent the Second World War in an internment camp in Britain. But after the war, as it became clear what his countrymen had done, particularly in the Holocaust, Jürgen Moltmann was really, well, like many, Jürgen Moltmann was horrified by what had happened, and he tried to think how God could cope with how God must feel about the suffering in the world. And he came to the understanding that in some cosmic, mysterious way, all the evil and all the suffering in the world was put onto Jesus in the cross. So Jesus' crucifixion wasn't just something that happened in one place at one time 2,000 years ago. It's something that happens every time there's violence and hatred. So in the concentration camps of the Second World War, Jesus was in the gas chambers. When people are murdered today, Jesus is the person being murdered. The cross is it's like almost like a black hole where all of the suffering of the world is held there, and God is there in it. And therefore there's a promise that God will be raised. So all of these things will be raised and transformed from God. So these are 8 different ways of understanding why Jesus had to die. I wonder which ones work for you. Personally, I find the sort of the victory and the Jürgen Moltmann representation, I think that's the most helpful explanation of why Jesus died. And I wonder which one you find most resonate with you, which ones make sense to you for why Jesus died on the cross. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.